the interface. We are dealing with so much data that we have to be able to how to understand it, how to consume it, how to take it in. This is a quote from the ex-CEO of Google, who said, every 2 days now we create as much information that we did from the dawn of time to 2003. Every 2 days we create that much information. That is an incredible amount of information. How do we consume it? There are 160,000 flights. I was on one of them yesterday. You were probably as well. That fly every day across the United States. That's a tremendous amount of information. How do we even make sense of that? So an artist by the name of Aaron Goebel took it and said, what if we actually made a picture of it? So this is the planes that are traveling across the United States about 6 o'clock in the evening. You can actually see the patterns. You can see them coming over from Hawaii. As the evening progresses on, you can see that it was going dark, where actually people are starting to go to sleep. As the middle of the night rolls around at 4 o'clock in the morning, you can see that basically everybody's asleep except those that are on the red eyes out of the west coast flying to the east coast. Morning comes along, the east coast begins to wake up. Pretty soon, the rest of the country is awake. And this is just airplane patterns. You can actually see the outline of the United States through that. And there's the traffic going out to Hawaii and the traffic coming in from Europe. Now, in just those very few slides, we begin to understand how air traffic works. If you dive in deeper, this is actually a shot of an airport. The blue are colored are the ones that are taking off, and the whites are the ones that are landing. You can actually see the patterns from that. When you begin to take data and put it into ways that people can easily consume, all of a sudden we have something interesting. There's another one. These are SMS tweets. And so these are normal tweets, and then it goes up when something happens, and it goes back. And this is just a day-to-day activity until New Year's came around. This is New Year's. What did everybody do on New Year's? They texted somebody, Happy New Year, from that. So we're playing around with this at Realtor.com as well. This is not something we publish. This is something we're just doing internally. We're taking bits of data. See, how do we actually put this in a way that consumers can actually take it in easier, aggregate that data? We have market time. We have number of homes, which is inventory. You have prices. How do those three things work together to actually make any sense? We can take a look at various bits of data using bubble charts for that. We can actually drive into local neighborhoods and see how those things affect there as well. So what about you? There's a few things we know. The most common distance moved was 5 miles or less. Some people do move more than that, but actually, interestingly, the younger generation, the ones that are first-time buyers, are actually the smaller set. They're the ones that are moving closer. We know that 77% of them buy single-family homes, and they buy a home that is roughly within 30% of the current value of the home that they're in, be it rental or even a parent's home or something along those lines for that. You know that the top factor that influences them is the quality of the neighborhood that they're in. They also want to have convenience to work, and the third is actually affordability. But the affordability is actually baked into those other two as well, because they won't look at neighborhoods they know they can't afford. So we know all of this about the people that are coming to our sites. So you take an area, when someone's interested in buying a house, you apply the neighborhood to it. You apply the circle around it, and we say, if they're interested in this type of a house, because this is where their starting point, this is probably the money that they have, what it ends up is the average buyer that's out there, there are probably only 50 homes in the system that they're actually eligible or interested in buying. So no longer are you dealing with 80 million numbers of people coming to the site and 3.6 million listings on it. If you actually know a bit about this and begin to connect it down, all of a sudden, for everyone that comes to a site, there's only a small handful of homes. That's the delta we then have to begin to close. We know the buyers spend about 12 weeks on it, and at a time they look at 12 homes. So then the delta is, how do I take those 50 and help the buyer read it down to those 12? That's manageable. All the data that we have, all the systems that we have, what are they interested in? They're interested in crime, they're interested in traffic, they're interested in pollen counts, they're interested in noise, they're interested in all of that data. That's the stuff that we need to have in there. We need to have it in there so we can help those consumers make that type of a decision. Why? Why? Because we believe that they should buy a house. How do we get the realtors back involved in that? 66% of the time, after looking at a house that they're interested on the internet, they do a drive-by or they go and visit that house, and that is where that people-to-people connection is made for them. I think there's also another thing that we can do at the MLS, and this has been referred to a couple times in the earlier conversation. We have a couple disconnects. The typical first-time home buyer is 30 years old. The typical realtor is 56 years old. There is a disconnect there, and the disconnect, I don't believe, is simply age. I believe that is easily overcome. My father is 79 years old. He works a computer every day of his life. He's completely comfortable with it. I don't believe it's that issue. But it is a mindset and where they're coming from, what they think about, the questions they ask, where they expect each other to be. Are the MLSs in a position where you are feeding or training or teaching the membership how to think like a consumer? So that when the realtor and the consumer make that connection, they're both speaking the same language at the same place, ready to go to the next step. Because if our whole goal is to get that consumer into a house and do that through the interaction with the realtor, when they connect, they need to be connected at the same spot. They need to be speaking the same language. They need to understand how to relate to each other. So the information that is collected in the MLS is consistent with the type of information that the consumer is looking for. In a market like this, you have 20,000 agents out on the streets. The amount of data that can be collected that will be interesting to a consumer is phenomenal. We could know something about every single neighborhood, every single street, every single corner, every single residence in that could be collected over time. Housed in the MLS can be actually a useful piece to connect that to. Are we utilizing the systems and the tools? Are we thinking about how do we connect our membership to that consumer in a way that's meaningful? So we've talked about the why, that need to understand why we do something, not just what, not just how. Those are derivatives of the why. We talked about hows, we talked about what's. Now, it costs money. So if we're going to do this is not something you can simply just do as a side project. It's not something that you can do that you hire an intern to say, throw up a website because we want to capture all those consumers because I hear there's money in capturing consumers, so there's a benefit in it. To do this right and to take it to where we are now, to that 100 or 1,000 or maybe 1,000,000 times better that we're shooting for, this is an investment. An investment in understanding the consumer, understanding what data we have, how to connect those two pieces together. How much data? Well, here's my swag. If you don't know what swag is, it's silly, wild guess. I would say it's somewhere between $2 and $4 per listing per month. So you can do the math. How many listings you have in your system, multiply it by those numbers. That's probably the budget that you would need to have to actually run a world-class website, to actually take it to that level, to engage those consumers, to bring them in, making it meaningful, etc. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. But something to think about if there's a benefit for that. I'll leave you with this as you begin to think about that. You can read. Thank you.